Have you ever wondered why real change feels so impossible? Not just hard, not just inconvenient, but impossible. Think about it. Every January, millions of people set resolutions. This year, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. This year, I'll finally quit smoking. This year, I'll stop procrastinating and get my finances in order. The gyms are full, the apps are downloaded, the motivational speeches are played on repeat, and yet by February, most treadmills are empty, most diets are broken, and most resolutions are forgotten. Now here's the part that will shock you. Studies show that even when doctors tell heart patients they will die if they don't change, only 1 in 7 manages to do it successfully. Think about that for a moment: life and death. The highest stakes possible, and still 6 out of 7 people fail. That statistic alone is enough to make anyone pause. If the threat of death doesn't push us to change, then what hope do New Year's resolutions really have? Clearly, something deeper is at play. And that's exactly where today's conversation begins. Why motivation isn't steady enough? Most of us were taught that the recipe for change is simple. Decide what you want. Find your motivation. Apply enough willpower until the new habit sticks. We treat it like a math equation. Effort plus motivation equals sign transformation. But if that were true, wouldn't more people succeed? Why would tart patients, people with everything to lose, still fall back into old patterns? Why would someone desperate to save their marriage, protect their health, or secure their finances still keep sabotaging themselves? The truth is, motivation is overrated. It might get you started, but it rarely carries you through. Willpower can push you for a week, a month, maybe even a year, but eventually it fades. And when it does, the old patterns come rushing back, almost like a rubber band snapping you to where you started. This is why diets fail. It's why people relapse into smoking after months of quitting. It's why we binge after promising moderation. The surface problem, overeating, overspending, overworking, isn't the real issue. It's a symptom. The deeper problem is hidden. The default model of change. Harvard professor Lahey calls it the just do it model of change. We see what needs to happen: lose weight, exercise more, save money, and we assume the only thing missing is discipline. So, we summon willpower. We pump ourselves up, we write goals on sticky notes, post affirmations on mirrors, download apps, buy new planners, and tell ourselves, this time, I'll do it right. And for a little while it works. The pounds drop, the money gets saved, the cigarettes stay unlit. But eventually, old cravings return, old fears resurface, and the new habits collapse under the weight of what feels natural, automatic, inevitable. Why? Because the just do it model treats change like a technical problem, as if all we need is the right steps and enough grit. But real change isn't usually technical, it's adaptive. It requires us to confront the hidden assumptions, loyalties, and fears inside us, the things we rarely admit even to ourselves. Here's a simple example. Imagine someone who wants to lose weight. Technically, the path is clear. Eat fewer calories, exercise more, repeat. Everyone knows the formula, and yet millions fail every year. Why? Because underneath the intention to lose weight, there might be an invisible loyalty. Eating comforts me when I feel anxious. Food is how my family bonds. So dieting feels like betrayal, but have always been the funny overweight friend. Who am I if I stum not that? These aren't conscious thoughts most of the time. They live in the shadows, shaping behavior quietly like hidden programming. You can diet for a month, but if you don't address the loyalty to comfort, belonging, or identity, the change won't stick. And this doesn't just apply to health. It shows up in careers, relationships, and money. Someone might truly want to save for retirement, but unconsciously they're loyal to living for the moment. Someone might desperately want to speak up at work, but unconsciously fear rejection so much that they silence themselves. Someone might long for a healthier relationship, but unconsciously hold the belief, I'm unworthy of love, which keeps them stuck. This is the gap between intention and behavior. The exact gap Lisa Lahey and her co-author Robert Keegan set out to understand. So here's the question. How many times have you tried to change something important and failed? Maybe it was a diet you couldn't stick to, a financial plan that crumbled under impulse spending, a promise to yourself to stop procrastinating, a relationship pattern you swore you'd break but didn't. If you've ever beaten yourself up thinking, I must not care enough or I just don't have the discipline, here's the truth. You've been fighting the wrong battle. It's not about lacking willpower. It's about battling an invisible system inside you, one that resists change to protect you. Lisa Lahey calls this our immunity to change. Think of it like the body's immune system. Just as your immune system fights off foreign invaders to keep you safe, your psychological immune system fights off change. Not because it wants to sabotage you, but because it's trying to protect values and beliefs it thinks are essential for your survival. But here's the twist. Often, those protections are outdated. They keep you stuck, small and limited, long after they've stopped serving you. So, if motivation isn't enough, if willpower alone doesn't work, and if our own hidden loyalties are sabotaging us, what's the solution? That's where the inner landscape comes in. It's not about trying harder, it's about looking deeper. And once you see what's really going on beneath the surface, change stops being an endless uphill battle and starts becoming possible, sustainable, even liberating. But here's the surprising part. Most of us don't even realize this hidden landscape exists. And that's exactly what we'll uncover in the next section. If you've ever felt frustrated by your inability to change, here's a comforting truth. You're not lazy, you're not weak, and you're not broken. What you're really fighting is something invisible. Your inner landscape. Think of your inner landscape as the unseen territory of your mind. The values, loyalties, fears, and assumptions that live beneath the surface. These are not things you consciously choose every morning. They're often unconscious, deeply wired beliefs about who you are, what matters, and what it means to stay safe in the world. And here's the catch. When you try to change a behavior without addressing the hidden terrain underneath, it's like trying to plant a seed in soil that hasn't been tilled. The roots can't take hold. Let's go back to that heart patient statistic. Remember, even when doctors say, change your lifestyle or you will die, 6 out of 7 people still can't do it. On the surface, this makes no sense. Urgency, check. Clear instructions, check. Motivation, off the charts, and yet most fail. Why? Because the real battle isn't set about exercise or calories or quitting cigarettes. It's about something deeper, something like this. If I stop eating the foods I love, I should lose the one pleasure I can rely on. If I quit smoking, I still have no way to calm my anxiety. If I rest instead of working non-stop, people will think I sip lazy. These beliefs are rarely said out loud, but they're powerful. They create an unconscious resistance, a psychological immune system that pushes back against change. It's not that people don't want to live. It's that another part of them is fighting even harder to hold on to what feels safe, familiar, or tied to their identity. Harvard researcher Ron Hafitz puts it brilliantly. The biggest mistake leaders and really all of us make is treating adaptive challenges like technical problems. A technical problem is straightforward. If your car won't start because the battery is dead, you replace the battery. Problem solved. But an adaptive problem isn't solved with a quick fix. It requires changing the way you think, the way you see yourself, the way you relate to the world. Losing weight by cutting calories? That's technical. Facing the fear of losing comfort, connection, or identity that food provides? That's adaptive. And it's the adaptive challenges that derail us, because most of us never even realize we're facing them. Lisa Lahey calls them hidden commitments or hidden loyalties. These are the invisible contracts you've made with yourself, often without realizing it. You might say you're committed to being healthy, but deep down you're equally committed to avoiding discomfort. You might say you want financial security, but unconsciously you're committed to keeping up with your friends' spending habits so you won't feel left out. You might say you want to be a confident leader, but you're also committed to avoiding criticism, so you play it safe and stay silent. These hidden loyalties are like invisible brakes. You can press the gas pedal of motivation all you want, but the car won't move until you release the brake. In the interview, Jonathan Satovsky shared the story of his father, diagnosed with cardiovascular disease at just 38. He faced a life-threatening condition. The research was clear. A plant-based diet could reverse much of the damage. Jonathan begged, pleaded, showed him studies, and yet, for over a decade, his father resisted. Why? Not because he didn't want to live, but because for him, food wasn't just fuel. It was comfort, culture, and identity. Eating differently wasn't just a diet, it was a betrayal of what made life enjoyable. This is what the inner landscape looks like in real life. Rational arguments and medical facts weren't enough because they were aimed at the surface problem. The real resistance lived deeper, in the hidden loyalties of pleasure, belonging, and identity. Here's the tricky part. Most of us don't even know these loyalties exist. They operate like blind spots on the road. You don't see them, but they're still steering your behavior. Think about it. How many times have you said, "I don't know why I keep doing this"? How many times have you promised, "This time will be different," only to find yourself repeating the same pattern? How many times have you been frustrated by your own inconsistency? That's your blind spot in action. You can't fight what you can't see. Now, here sits the paradox. Most people say they want change, but few want the mirror that comes with it. Looking into your inner landscape means confronting uncomfortable truths. Maybe you don't speak up because you're terrified of rejection. Maybe you overspend because deep down you fear scarcity so much that spending feels like proof you're alive. Maybe you overwork because your sense of worth is tied entirely to achievement. Facing these truths can feel like a punch to the gut. It's no wonder people resist. But here's the secret. Once you see the blind spot, you can do something about it. The mirror isn't punishment, it's liberation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most self-help advice fails because it skips the inner landscape. You've probably heard the tips. Wake up at 5 a.m. Track your habits. Use affirmations. And sure, those can help if you're already aligned internally. But if your hidden loyalty is pulling in the opposite direction, no amount of surface hacks will last. It's like trying to patch a leaking roof with duct tape. It might hold for a storm or two, but eventually the water gets through. Lasting change requires more than tactics. It requires uncovering and transforming the unconscious commitments that keep you stuck. So here's the big question. How do you actually see your inner landscape? How do you shine a light on blind spots that by definition are hidden from you? That's where Lahey's breakthrough framework, the immunity to change model, comes in. Think of it as a mental X-ray, a tool for mapping your unconscious commitments and assumptions so you can finally see what's been holding you back. And once you see it, that's when change stops being a constant battle and starts becoming possible. In the next section, we'll break down exactly how the immunity to change model works and why it's helped everyone from CEOs to everyday people make transformations they once thought were impossible. So far, we've uncovered the paradox. Even when the stakes are life or death, most people can't change. Not because they lack motivation, but because they're fighting against something hidden, their own inner landscape. Now, let's explore the tool designed to shine a light on that invisible resistance, the immunity to change framework. When you first hear the phrase, immunity to change, it might sound discouraging, like you're doomed to stay stuck. But that's not the case. Think of your physical immune system. Its job is to protect you from foreign invaders, germs, bacteria, viruses. Most of the time, it saves your life. But sometimes, the immune system gets confused. It overreacts, or it starts attacking the very body it's meant to protect. Your psychological immune system works the same way. It protects you from risks, social rejection, failure, shame, loss, and most of the time, that's helpful. But when it comes to growth, that same system can accidentally sabotage you. It treats change as a threat, even when change is exactly what you need to survive. The immunity to change model is about identifying when your own mind is overprotecting you so you can work with it instead of against it. Lahey and Robert Keegan describe their framework as a kind of mental X-ray. Just as an X-ray shows what's happening inside the body, bones, fractures, hidden issues, the immunity to change map reveals what's happening inside the mind. Here's how it works. Step by step. Identify your goal. Start with something you genuinely want to change. It could be personal. I want to exercise regularly. Professional. I want to speak up more in meetings. Or relational. I want to be more patient with my kids. List the behaviors that work against it. Next, you write down what you're actually doing or not doing that undermines your goal. Maybe you skip the gym. Maybe you stay silent when you have ideas. Maybe you snap at your kids when you're stressed. Uncover the hidden commitments. Then comes the breakthrough step. You ask yourself, if I imagine doing the opposite, what's the worry or fear that shows up? For example, if you want to speak up more at work, but you stay quiet, the hidden commitment might be, I am committed to not looking foolish. Reveal the big assumptions. Finally, you identify the core belief driving the hidden commitment. This is the big assumption. Using the same example, the big assumption might be, if I speak up and I step wrong, people will lose respect for me and my career will suffer. By the end, you have a full map, your goal, the behaviors that undermine it, the hidden commitments protecting you, and the big assumptions underneath. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion until you finally reach the core. The genius of this framework is simple. You can't fight what you can't see. Once your blind spots are made visible, you can test them. Take that big assumption. If I speak up and I'm wrong, my career will suffer. Is that always true? Probably not. You might even design small experiments to test it. Maybe you share one idea in a safe setting and see how people respond. Chances are, you'll learn that the assumption is exaggerated or even false. Over time, as you gather evidence, the big assumption loses its grip, and when it does, the hidden commitment weakens, and the old self-sabotaging behavior begins to dissolve. That's how change becomes sustainable, not through brute force, but through new understanding. Let's apply this to something universal, dieting. Goal: I want to lose 20 pounds. Undermining behavior: eating fast food at night. Hidden commitment: I am committed to not feeling deprived or left out during family meals. Big assumption: if I don't eat what my family eats, I feel isolated, and they see me as difficult or selfish. Now, imagine realizing that the real reason your diet fails isn't lack of willpower, it's fear of losing connection with loved ones. That changes everything, because now you can ask, is that really true? Could you still bond with your family in other ways? Could you explain your goals and invite their support? Could you cook healthier meals together? The moment you see the assumption for what it is, you gain choices. You're no longer chained to the invisible belief. One of the most fascinating discoveries is that the immunity to change framework doesn't just apply to individuals, it applies to entire organizations. Think about a company that says, we want to innovate, but in practice, employees stick to safe ideas, managers punish mistakes, and leadership avoids risk. On the surface, the organization claims to value innovation, but underneath, there sips a hidden loyalty. We are committed to avoiding failure, and the big assumption might be, if we fail, we still lose our reputation, clients, or stability. Until that hidden commitment is addressed, no amount of brainstorming sessions or innovation slogans will work. The company will remain stuck in its own psychological immune system. People often describe the immunity to change process as both humbling and liberating. Humbling because it forces you to admit uncomfortable truths. Maybe I accept not lazy, I accept scared. Maybe I accept not undisciplined, I accept loyal to comfort. But also liberating, because once you see the fear, you can work with it. You're no longer trapped in self-blame or frustration. You're dealing with the real issue. And here's the best part. You don't have to fix everything overnight. Change becomes a process of experimenting, testing, and gathering evidence, gradually rewriting the beliefs that hold you back. So far, we've explored why willpower fails and how the immunity to change framework exposes the hidden commitments keeping us stuck. But theory only takes us so far. What makes this truly powerful are the stories, the personal, leadership, and financial examples that show how the framework works in real life. In the next section, we'll look at those stories in detail, from Jonathan's father and his health battle, to teams stuck in compliance, to clients paralyzed by financial decisions. We'll see exactly how hidden loyalties shape our lives and how uncovering them sets us free. We've talked about why willpower isn't enough and how the immunity to change framework reveals the hidden commitments holding us back. But theory only matters if it plays out in real life. So let's dig into stories, the kind that show how this model explains struggles we've all faced in health, leadership, and money. Jonathan Satovsky shared a deeply personal story about his father. Diagnosed with cardiovascular disease at just 38 years old, his father faced a terrifying reality. Doctors made it clear if he didn't change his habits, the consequences could be fatal. Jonathan researched relentlessly, eventually finding evidence that a plant-based diet could reverse some of the disease's damage. Excited, he brought the studies to his father. He pleaded with him, urged him, even begged him to try. And yet, for over a decade, his father resisted. Think about that. The data was solid. The stakes were life or death. The son's love and encouragement were unwavering, and still his father said no. Why? Because for him, food wasn't just fuel. It was comfort. It was identity. It was the daily rhythm that made life feel normal. To him, giving up his favorite meals wasn't just about eating differently. It felt like a kind of torture. This is the essence of hidden loyalties. On the surface, his father wanted to live. But beneath the surface, he was equally committed to preserving comfort, familiarity, and enjoyment. That loyalty was powerful enough to override even the fear of death. This story forces us to face a sobering truth. Most people don't fail because they don't want to change. They fail because they underestimate the invisible pull of their inner landscape. Now, let's step into the workplace. Imagine a team that says, "We want to be innovative. We want bold ideas." The leaders ask for brainstorming. They hang posters about creativity. They talk about disruption. But when the meetings begin, the room goes quiet. Employees hold back. The ideas that do get shared feel safe, predictable, almost recycled. On the surface, the team seems stuck. Leaders might complain, "Why don't they just speak up? Don't they care enough?" But if you look deeper, through the lens of immunity to change, the picture changes. The hidden commitment isn't about innovation at all. It's about safety. The unspoken loyalty is we're committed to not looking foolish, not risking embarrassment, not losing status. And the big assumption is, if I share something bold and it fails, my colleagues will think less of me and my career will suffer. When you understand this, the silence makes perfect sense. People aren't lazy. They're protecting themselves. Their psychological immune system is doing its job. And here's the breakthrough. Once leaders recognize this, they can begin creating environments that challenge the assumption, safe spaces to share half-formed ideas, celebrating attempts, not just successes. Gradually, the team can test their fears and discover that speaking up isn't as dangerous as they assumed. That's when real innovation begins, not from slogans, but from rewiring the hidden loyalties of the culture. Now, let's talk about money. Picture a client who receives a lump sum, maybe from selling a business, inheriting wealth, or retiring with savings. Logically, they know they should invest. They want financial security. They want to protect their future. And yet, they freeze. They read the news, get overwhelmed by headlines, and hesitate to make a decision. They put it off for weeks, then months. Eventually, opportunities slip away. On the surface, it looks like procrastination, maybe even irresponsibility, but underneath, it's something else. The hidden commitment is I'm committed to avoiding the risk of making the wrong choice. The big assumption is, if I make one mistake, everything will collapse, my future, my security, my family's trust in me. That assumption is paralyzing. It's like standing at a crossroads with dozens of paths and believing that one wrong step will destroy your life. No wonder they can't move. But once you see the assumption, you can test it. Is one mistake really catastrophic, or is that belief exaggerated? Could smaller, safer experiments prove otherwise? Could diversifying, seeking advice, or starting with modest steps show that mistakes are survivable, even valuable? This is where financial coaching becomes more than numbers. It's about shining the mirror, helping clients see the hidden beliefs that sabotage their security. Across these examples, health, leadership, finance, the pattern is clear. People say they want change. They believe they want change. But beneath the surface, their hidden loyalties are equally strong, sometimes stronger. The dieter wants health, but also comfort. The employee wants innovation, but also safety. The investor wants security, but also certainty. And until those hidden loyalties are revealed, no amount of motivation, discipline, or advice will stick. Stories like these are powerful because they remind us we're not alone. Everyone has blind spots. Everyone has hidden loyalties. Everyone has an immunity to change. Hearing them allows us to reflect on our own lives. Where am I saying I want one thing but secretly committed to another? Where do my big assumptions keep me stuck? What loyalties am I protecting that no longer serve me? And the beauty of the framework is that it doesn't instead shame us for this. It doesn't instead say, you stir weak. It says, you stir human. And now that you can see what steps happening, you have a choice. But here's the bigger picture. Change isn't just about individuals making healthier choices or teams speaking up more. It's also about entire organizations and cultures. And that leads us to the next breakthrough, the concept of deliberately developmental organizations, workplaces built not just to get results, but to grow people. In the next section, we'll explore how the immunity to change model scales from personal growth to collective transformation, and how some leaders are using it to reshape not only their companies, but their entire ecosystems. Up to now, we've looked at individuals, the father resisting a plant-based diet, the employee too afraid to share an idea, the investor frozen by fear of mistakes. But what happens when these hidden commitments don't just belong to one person, but to an entire organization? That's where Lisa Lahey and Robert Keegan's next big idea comes in: deliberately developmental organizations, DDOs. Most companies say they want growth in revenue, growth in market share, growth in impact. But very few focus on the type of growth that actually makes the first two possible: the growth of their people. A deliberately developmental organization flips the script. It treats personal development as central to the business model, not a side perk. Instead of hiding weaknesses, employees are encouraged to surface them. Instead of pretending blind spots don't exist, they're explored openly. Instead of protecting fragile egos, people learn to embrace feedback as fuel. In other words, a DDO is built to challenge the very immunity to change that keeps most workplaces stuck. Think about your average workplace. How often do people stay silent in meetings to avoid looking foolish? How often do employees nod along even when they disagree? How often do leaders hide vulnerabilities for fear of losing authority? These behaviors are normal, but they're also costly. They stifle innovation, slow decision-making, and block collaboration. And all of it stems from the same problem: hidden commitments to safety, comfort, or reputation. In a DDO, leaders recognize this and ask a radical question: what if we built an environment where people confront those blind spots directly every day? That means normalizing self-reflection, creating systems for coaching, designing feedback loops that are supportive, not punitive. The result? Instead of employees playing defense, protecting themselves from risk, they start playing offense, growing, experimenting, and contributing fully. One of the most cited examples of a DDO is a company called NextJump. NextJump is an e-commerce and technology services firm, but what sets it apart isn't the products, it sets the culture. The company is famous for saying, "Better me plus better you equal better us." What does that mean in practice? At NextJump, employees are constantly encouraged to stretch beyond their comfort zones. They have systems where colleagues give one another direct, constructive feedback. Leaders model vulnerability, openly admitting their struggles. Instead of hiding failures, the company treats them as opportunities to learn. And here's the incredible part. This culture of deliberate development doesn't just make people feel good. It drives performance. Employees become more resilient, teams become more innovative, and the company thrives. It's proof that growth and results aren't opposites. They're two sides of the same coin. Jonathan Satovsky brought up a powerful question during his conversation with Lisa Lahey. Could the principles of a DDO extend beyond companies to clients, communities, even entire ecosystems? Think about it. In wealth management, clients don't just need financial strategies. They need to confront the blind spots and hidden loyalties that sabotage their money decisions. In healthcare, patients don't just need prescriptions. They need to uncover the fears and assumptions that keep them stuck in unhealthy patterns. Imagine if schools, hospitals, financial firms, and governments all operated with a DDO mindset. Imagine if confronting blind spots and embracing growth were as normal as brushing your teeth. That's the dream. A world where deliberate development isn't confined to HR departments, but woven into the fabric of society. Of course, creating a DDO isn't easy. Most companies avoid it for 3 reasons. Fear of vulnerability. Leaders worry that if they admit mistakes or weaknesses, they'll lose authority. Employees fear being judged or punished for revealing blind spots. Short-term thinking. Development takes time. Many companies prioritize quarterly numbers over long-term growth. Cultural resistance. In many workplaces, the unspoken rule is fit in, keep your head down, don't rock the boat. Shifting to openness feels risky. And yet, for the organizations that dare to embrace it, the payoff is massive. Because the truth is, when people grow, everything grows. Think about what happens when leaders model this kind of growth. A manager admits, "I'm afraid to delegate because I assume no one can do it as well as me." Suddenly, the team feels safe to share their own fears. A CEO confesses, "I often struggle with patience in meetings." Suddenly, employees realize they don't have to be perfect to be respected. A team practices feedback daily, learning to challenge one another without tearing each other down. Suddenly, innovation skyrockets. The ripple effect goes beyond the office. Employees bring the mindset home. Parents model self-reflection for their kids. Communities benefit from people who are less defensive, more open, more willing to learn. And when you tie this back to finance and health, the themes of Jonathan's Wisdom, Wealth, and Wellness podcast, the connections are clear. The same immunity to change that blocks leaders also blocks families saving for the future or patients adopting healthier lifestyles. A DDO mindset could transform all of it. Even if you're not a CEO, you can apply these principles. Your organization might be your family, your friend group, or your small team at work. Ask yourself, do I make it safe for people to admit struggles? Do I model growth by acknowledging my own blind spots? Do I encourage feedback that helps people get better, not just feel comfortable? You don't need a corporate mandate to start. You just need the courage to turn the mirror on yourself and invite others to do the same. So far, we've seen how the immunity to change model transforms individuals and how the DDO mindset can reshape organizations. But there's one more piece, the inner development of the individual leader, because at the heart of it all lies a powerful distinction between being socialized by others and being self-authoring. Understanding this difference is the key to leading yourself and others through change. And that steps where we start headed next. We've explored why change is so hard, how hidden loyalties sabotage us, and how the immunity to change framework can uncover what's really going on. We've looked at how entire organizations can transform when they adopt a developmental mindset. Now, let's zoom in on the heart of leadership and personal growth, the difference between being socialized and being self-authoring. This distinction may be one of the most important ideas in adult development because it explains why some people remain trapped in cycles of compliance while others break free to lead authentically. A socialized mindset is one where your identity is largely defined by the expectations of others. If you live with this lens, you measure yourself by whether you're a good son or daughter, a good employee, a good friend. Goodness itself is externally defined. You look outward for approval, validation, and reassurance. In the workplace, people with a socialized mindset often hesitate to make independent judgments. They sit quick to ask, "What do you want me to do? What accepts the right answer? Will this make you happy with me?" There's nothing wrong with this. It's a natural stage of development, but it creates vulnerability. When your sense of worth depends on external validation, you're constantly at the mercy of others' opinions. By contrast, a self-authoring mindset is defined from within. People in this stage develop their own internal compass. They still value relationships, but their sense of self isn't controlled by them. Instead, they ask, what do I believe is the right thing here? What standards am I holding myself to? What am I trying to accomplish regardless of approval? Leaders with a self-authoring mindset don't ignore others, but they're not enslaved by external expectations. They take responsibility for defining what good means, and they operate with principles that come from their own clarity. This doesn't mean arrogance. In fact, it often creates more humility, because when your identity isn't fragilely tied to approval, you can admit mistakes, learn, and grow without collapsing. How do you know if someone is operating from a socialized or self-authoring stance? Look for the signals. Socialized. They constantly seek reassurance. They struggle to disagree openly. They're hesitant to evaluate their own work without guidance. Self-authoring. They can articulate their own reasoning. They're willing to stand by a position even if it's unpopular. They define success by internal standards as well as external ones. But remember, this isn't about labeling people as good or bad. It's about recognizing that development is a journey. Most adults spend their lives transitioning between these stages, and even the most self-authoring leaders can fall back into socialized patterns when under stress. For leaders, this distinction is critical. If you lead a team of socialized thinkers and you constantly give orders, you reinforce their dependency. They'll never learn to think for themselves because you're feeding the very assumption that keeps them stuck. But if you encourage them to define their own standards, reflect on their own reasoning, and test their own assumptions, you help them move toward self-authoring. And that's where real growth happens, because self-authoring individuals are the ones who can innovate, lead authentically, and sustain change. Lisa Lahey pointed out something subtle but powerful. Even our self-talk is shaped by our hidden assumptions. For example, imagine you constantly tell yourself, I can stay disciplined. That step's not just negative thinking, it steps an assumption. The real belief underneath might be, I don't have what it takes to follow through. But what if you tested that assumption? What if you reframed it as, I haven't done it yet? Suddenly the door opens. Consent becomes yet. Impossible becomes I set impossible. This shift isn't just motivational fluff, it's neuroscience. Every time you test a limiting belief and gather evidence against it, you rewire your brain. You weaken the grip of the old assumption and strengthen a new, more accurate one. That's how growth happens. Not by chanting affirmations, but by systematically challenging the beliefs that keep you small. Here are steps where many people stumble. They expect immediate results. They test a new belief once or twice, and when life doesn't transform instantly, they say, see, I was right all along. But remember, these limiting beliefs have lived inside you for decades. They are deeply wired neural pathways. Changing them takes time. Think of it like carving a new trail in the forest. The first few times you walk it, the path is rough, overgrown, hard to see. But if you keep walking it day after day, it becomes clearer, smoother, easier. Eventually, it becomes the default trail, and the old one fades. That's why patience matters. Real change is less like flipping a switch and more like growing a tree, slow, steady, but powerful. One of the most powerful lessons in leadership comes from a quote often attributed to Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom. Most of us live in reactive mode. Someone criticizes us and we snap back, stress hits, and we reach for the cigarette or the drink, fear surfaces, and we retreat. But when you learn to create that space, you gain freedom. You can pause, you can notice the assumption at work, you can choose a different response. This is emotional regulation, and it's the difference between being a prisoner of your immune system and being the author of your own life. So what does all of this mean for you? It means the barriers you face are not signs of weakness. They're signs of humanity. Everyone has an immunity to change. Everyone carries hidden loyalties. Everyone has blind spots. But once you learn to see them, once you learn to take off the glasses and examine the lens, you unlock choice. You stop being subject to your assumptions and start making them objects of reflection. And that is the foundation of freedom. Freedom to change your health. Freedom to transform your finances. Freedom to lead authentically. Freedom to live a life not dictated by fear, but guided by purpose. In the end, growth isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself, unconstrained, self-aware, and self-authoring. If there's one takeaway, it's this. Stop fighting yourself with willpower alone. Start exploring the inner landscape that drives your behavior. Ask, what hidden commitments might be sabotaging me? What big assumptions am I holding that need to be tested? Where am I still living to please others instead of authoring my own life? Because the moment you shine that mirror, the moment you face those blind spots, you step into a new kind of power, the power to truly change. And remember, change is not instant, but it is possible. Always